Hello and welcome to the Where Does It Come From podcast. This time I'm interviewing Paola Masperi, who is an impact entrepreneur and the founder of Mayamiko, which is a trust and a clothing brand. Paola and I worked together back in 2018 when we collaborated on Where Does It Come From's African project using organic rain-fed cotton, which was then tailored into our designs by Mayamiko's team in Malawi. Mayamiko hit the headlines big time in 2019 when Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, wore one of the beautiful Mayamiko dresses on her African tour. So, hello, Paola. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Joe. Good to see you, and very nice tunic. I know
I'm so glad you like it.
Can't see it, but it's looking very nice.
It's so well made by your beautiful team as well.
Oh,
as you can see,
less.
It's lasting well. It's a few years, well, 3 years old now.
Yeah,
I think. So you've been involved in fair trade for a really long time. You set up Mayamiko Trust in 2008, so you're one of the pioneers, really. What was it that triggered you to set up Mayamiko Trust?
Yeah, so that's kind of going back quite a few years, isn't it? Yeah, so I have spent some time in Malawi, in Uganda, in Kenya, and in Ethiopia, working on some educational projects at the time. And the majority of the time that I spent in Africa was in Malawi. And I was working with the Ministry for Women and Child Development. And as it sort of happens, while working there, I made good friends with the lady who at the time was the Minister for Child and Women Development. And we really had some good conversations about women's needs and what might support them, what needed to change, both at a grassroots level, but also as a sort of political level to really support women development. And obviously, when women are empowered, we know that the ripple effects are felt in the family and in their community at large. And so from those conversations came the idea to try and set something up together at the time with this lady whose name is Kate Kainja. And so Mayamiko Trust was born, and really the spirit at the time, which is sort of the DNA still today, was to help provide women with choices. So we didn't walk in saying, we know what you need, but we walked in and said, if you tell us what you need, we'll support you as much as we can. Obviously, Kate as a local politician from a political point of view, and us as people that wanted to be able to make a difference on a more sort of grassroots level. And so the trust started, and one of the first focus groups we had with, I think it was about 60 women from various villages in a sort of province in central Malawi, was quite interesting because quite a lot of the women told us that they wanted to learn tailoring and sewing because they saw it as a skill that was flexible, that was helpful for them in their life, but also could earn them a living. It was something that they could do at home, but also work in a workshop or in a factory, and sort of fitted around their other commitments as mothers or carers. And so we started working with the local vocational training organization, Tiveta, and quite quickly started what we used to call the Sewing Academy, and it's now the Mayamiko Fashion Lab, which is providing tailoring and sewing training and a recognized qualification at the end of the program for a small number of women. And the program is just sort of going now. The needs haven't changed in terms of sort of the skill being in high demand. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wonderful. I've seen some beautiful pictures actually of your graduation ceremonies of the ladies being handed their certificates. And I guess that gives them opportunities. They've got something to show when they're going out looking for a job or trying to get finance to start up.
That's right.
Business. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the fact that they receive a qualification that is recognized by the government, and not just in Malawi, but also in the region, is actually really attractive for them. We don't have a specific age group that we work with. I mean, we tend to work with mostly women between sort of 16 and 30, but actually we had students in the 60s, so grandmothers who have sort of come back to hone their craft. But I think especially for the younger women who are planning perhaps to move overseas and go and get more experience in a larger factory. This is actually really, really valuable because it gives them something that they can sort of show their potential employers, although we would like to keep them all working with us because they're all so great. But obviously this was part of the sort of ethos of giving women choices so that they could do what they wanted and what worked for them. So the certificate is sort of part of that philosophy.
That's really important. And if I understand it right, you're also teaching them business skills as part of that, aren't you?
Yeah, so that was an interesting development. So a few years into providing the training, we sort of kept tabs on the ladies and sort of they kept coming back for check-ins, and we kept monitoring how they were doing. And one of the messages that kept coming back to us was that it was great to have the skill, so to be able to be a tailor. But what they were lacking, especially the ones that wanted to establish themselves as their own business, was more the sort of the business skills and the financial management skills, the marketing skills. So listening to that feedback that kept coming back to us, we developed, working with some local microfinance experts, a business and financial literacy course, which we invited all our previous graduates to come along, and now is been offered as a standard part of the training. And it really sort of made a difference, because that kind of understanding of how to manage finances, understand price points, calculate profits. If you don't have that, it's actually very hard to succeed in business, no matter how skilled a tailor you might be. And also when women often club together in small groups and start small cooperatives, especially when you have those dynamics with multiple, directors, if you like, of the business or shareholders, then being really clear on the money side of things and the business side of things becomes really, really important. So yeah, that was definitely a learning that we developed through the years, and then now is part of our standard practices.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, anywhere in the world, if you don't understand how a business works, you can have the best idea in the world, you can have the best skills in the world, but if you don't understand about the profit and the loss, as you say, the price points, the stocking, all sorts of different things, then it's just not going to work, is it? No, that's an amazing thing that you did there to help people. And do you keep in touch? Do you know what any of your graduates have moved on to do?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge scale charity, it's a small charity, so it's actually fairly easy, and everyone knows everyone. And I think there's also a sense of pride when there's achievements around having started a business or now actually being an employer of other people. So those stories often come back, but also we have a routine of getting everyone back for refreshers on a regular basis, or when new trends come in, we get everyone back to give them new ideas on products. So we did workshops on making jewelry, for example, using scrap fabrics, or at some point, this new kind of interior design furnishing became quite fashionable, and everyone wanted to learn how to make them because there was real demand in the local market for this product. So, we got everyone back in and did workshops and figured out how that whole sort of thing worked. So they just had an additional skill and something else to offer to the customers.
Definitely. No, it's amazing. And then what led from that? So that was 2008, and then in 2015 you started up the Mayamiko fashion label. So what made you decide to widen your offering into being a label as well as a trust?
Yeah, so I think it was a number of things, but sort of to put simply, what we had realized was that we were getting some really good quality output from the fashion center, the training lab, and it was exactly like the one you're wearing, and it just sort of seemed sensible to try and turn the charity from a sort of donation-based initiative to a sustainable enterprise that would be able to fund itself through the sale of products that it was producing. And it was partly because I always believed in the trade not aid sort of principles. But also that's what our trainees were asking for. You know, they kind of wanted to understand the business side of things. They wanted to, they sort of felt great pride in being able to sell their products, not just within Malawi, but all over the world. And I think also the world was starting to become a little bit more aware of topics around sustainability in fashion and ethics in fashion. And so I think it was an interesting time where, you know, certain niches of consumers were interested in buying the kind of products that we were able to make. I mean, it was all a little bit of a gamble. We had to start very small with just really accessories, and it was more to test the process, you know, the logistics. Does the website work? Are people okay to wait? How big a size of an order do we need to get to the UK for it to make sense? Because obviously we're sort of looking at international shipping, so both from an environmental impact but also from a cost perspective. So I think the first year was mostly experimentation and actually checking that people really wanted to buy those kinds of products. And then gradually since then, we have been adding a collection every year. You know, sort of first one was very small, was a small capsule with I think 8 pieces. So again, starting very modestly. And then from then we started producing sort of slightly more comprehensive collections, still one a year, just because we believe in being cross-seasonal, and we don't really think that we need more than that, to be honest. And then sort of I guess kind of grown from there.
You're very inclusive as well, aren't you, in your photography and everything? You have lots of models of different heritages and color of hair and skin and everything in your design.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we first started, we really were not sure who was going to buy Mayamiko products, because I think it's different when you're selling to the local market, but also to tourists that might be visiting the country. You know, there is always that kind of the psychology of the tourist, that you buy things when you're in a place because you want to support, because you love it in that context, and then you take it back and you think, oh, I'm not quite sure I would wear it, you know, at the office or whatever it is that, you know, we go these days. So I think it was quite interesting because we really were not sure what age group we might attract, people of what background. And I think one of the lovely things about Mayamiko is to see that we have a really wide customer base. So anything from you know, teens to people in the 60s, you know, backgrounds and heritages from kind of all over the world. We've now sold to 50 countries through the website. Brilliant. Yeah, so you know, places that we wouldn't have thought we could we would attract any customers in. So it's been a really nice experience to see that kind of the message has been quite universal, and so we try to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. I mean, you know, we're far from perfect and there's a lot that we need to do, you know, to get better at it, but there's definitely a desire to continue to strive to get better in that respect as well.
I think that's a classic social entrepreneur thing that I have myself, that we're always thinking, what can we do better? How can we have a better impact? Which you know, I admire you hugely for saying that, because what you're doing compared with a lot of other brands is absolutely amazing. But obviously we're always thinking, right, we've done that bit, now move on, what can we do that's even better than that? I mean, one of the reasons I love Mayamiko is the fabrics. I love looking through your collections and seeing the amazing fabrics, and I think for a lot of people, you see those absolutely gorgeous fabrics, but to have them in designs that appeal to our culture, I suppose, you know, our Western temperatures, for one thing, is a new sort of vibe, because I think people in the past, you'd see African fabrics, but not in clothing that you'd necessarily think you'd wear yourself. So that's what's a really exciting thing about Mayamiko, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, we try and you know, we are trying to be a bit more varied in our fabric selection, but there's often choices that you make, and some of them are about, do you work with local textiles, or do you import, and what are the compromises that you make? I mean, I think it's just interesting that, as you say, with every decision, there tends to be some sort of compromise in terms of choice, and it might hit some of the values that you really want to represent through your brand, but not the other. So so it's always a bit of a juggling act there.
Yes, carry on.
Yeah, no, but the fabrics are definitely one of our kind of unique features, and we take great pride in choosing them with the entire team. So it's nice to get together and sort of brainstorm on the colors and the prints, and sort of thinking what would work with what style, and everyone has got really strong views. So it's collections often end up looking quite different from the initial sort of, when you sort of lay them out on paper.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I know when we worked together back in 2018, because one of the main things was our tunic design, which we'd had done, and we were appealing to a certain age group, certain type of woman who would want a tunic for different things to wear, but then choosing which colors to try to have to match that was a really hard process. And like you say, it's something you need to involve a lot of people in, customer groups and the team and everything to get the right fabrics. And then I don't know how far back you remember, but we had big discussions about wanting to use organic rain-fed cotton that was African, but then getting the print designs to match onto that as well, and also keep the quality. So I completely understand it's a complicated thing to try and tick all the boxes, and sometimes you have to maybe compromise probably isn't the right word, but you have to try and choose which are the most important things at that particular time, don't you?
Definitely, yeah. And I guess every time you do something new, you learn, and then it's something that you can sort of, put in practice next time. So
exactly. It's always a big learning curve, but a very exciting one. And talking of excitement, how did you feel when you saw the coverage of Meghan Markle wearing your Mayamiko dress?
Oh gosh, jelly-legged. I think it's probably the best way to explain. Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise for us, and I actually can't remember. I remember my phone pinged like frantically, and I, didn't, like, I was just feeling it vibrating without sort of thinking too much about it. And then I looked, and then it was everywhere. And then suddenly, I mean, we had very few of those dresses for sale. So suddenly we had so many requests for, would we be restocking it, and when is it coming, and all that kind of stuff. So it was hugely exciting. It was hugely unexpected. We were sort of obviously delighted for us as a team in Malawi and in the UK. We were so excited because of her choice of when she wore it. It was obviously the first day when she landed, and she had gone to talk to a charity that worked on girls' empowerment, and she gave quite a powerful message then. So we like to think that this was all deliberate, and that the choice of the outfit matched the occasion, which whether it was deliberate or serendipitous, for us it was like a perfect moment where you have a role model wearing one of our pieces, talking to young women about women empowerment. So it just sort of felt quite magical.
Yes, and looking amazing in it as well. I mean, it looked fantastic. But I mean, I know everyone was so excited about it because our local paper in Ipswich picked up on the fact that they knew Mayamiko because you'd worked with us, so they then ran a piece on it as well, which was quite random. I thought everyone was so excited about it. And the other thing that I was having a look on the internet earlier on, and I was reading an article saying that although the dress retailed at £69, people were then selling it on eBay for £795.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And, as a kind of an ethical brand, I was thinking, oh, this is not ethical at all. But actually, I guess everything has a price, and it depends on what value you put on things, like always. But yeah, I do remember that happened. Again, I don't often use eBay, but I remember the evening of that day, someone emailing me with a screenshot of the same dress selling for, you know, almost £1,000 on eBay. And I still remember thinking, I need to do something about this. And then I tried to figure out who of the handful of dresses that we had sold, because that was all we had, might have done that. And then I thought, actually, I can't really do anything about this.
No,
but it did feel quite strange.
You have to hope they made a big donation.
I know that's what I think we did a social media post, but we said, you know, hopefully whoever is profiting from this is sort of sharing some of that profit.
You have to hope. But I mean, really, but the point is that Meghan Markle wearing that dress raised awareness not only of the cause that she was hoping to with the speech that she made, but also all of the people involved in your organization and what was happening. So
there was a lovely halo effect for other designers in Malawi, which was really nice to see, you know, kind of to be able to share that you know, with others that, you know, we had either collaborated with or, you know, that we just knew, you know, because obviously it's quite a small scene there. So yeah, no, it was definitely a special moment. And again, as an entrepreneur, it opened up a number of sort of interesting and challenging questions, because our model is to use either locally sourced fabrics, which tend to come in very small quantities. And one of the nice things about them is that they're rarely repeatable. So that makes each piece quite unique. Or certified textiles, but they tend to be more like your plain colors, or dead stock, which, you know, by definition is finite, you know. And so we had so many requests to produce it that actually there was one point where I thought, should we try and recreate this fabric or something similar to this fabric? Because I thought the business impact that this could have on us, you know, could be massive. And so there was a moment where I thought, what is the Mayamiko value to embody here? And so in the end, we decided not to. We decided that we were going to bring back the dress in other, you know, equally limited editions, small run prints, but that one was going to remain as a moment, you know, with that literally handful of dresses in that fabric, and then no more. So
I think that's perfect, because that's giving the message that as sort of ethical fashion social entrepreneurs, we're trying to get out there, isn't it? That it's not about, I want this, click my fingers, it arrives exactly as I want it. It's about each one's individually made. There's a finite number of each thing. We don't need to have something we don't need to own something just because we see someone else is wearing something and it's really nice and everything. So there's a whole lot of things. And we actually had a very similar situation back in 2017, because Joanna Lumley wore one of our scarves on her TV show, Joanna Lumley's India, and it was a pale blue khadi scarf with grey elephants printed on it, and it looked amazing. And of course we sold out, and we'd only made something like 40 in the first place of this design. So they went, and then it was that same thing. People were saying, could they have the same scarf? And so we took the decision to make a new elephant scarf, but with different colours of elephants, you know, because just because someone's worn that, why does everyone have to have exactly the same one, you know?
And I think it's also becomes about you sort of supporting the brands and the values that the people that you admire are supporting. So it's less about I want the exact identical thing, but it's almost I embrace the values that this thing represents. So it doesn't matter whether it's exactly the same thing or slightly different ones. Of course, there are always the people that will want exactly the same thing, but I think it's sort of culturally, it's important to sort of say, actually, this is how these pieces come together. This is why we can't keep producing them. And you know, here are some other options if you would like, and if not, then maybe you don't need it so much.
No, exactly. And the thing is as well, they now know the name Mayamiko, and hopefully that whole raising the awareness will mean that they'll come back and check if they like that, they might like something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit there about different fabrics, and we've focused a lot on the fair trade side, but I know Mayamiko, your whole ethos for the brand is to be very environment conscious as well as helping people. So can you tell us a bit about some of your planet friendly initiatives?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is a fairly accepted concept now, that you can't really have social justice without environmental justice. So, I mean, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when we first started about thinking about becoming a brand, there was still this divide, you know, and people were still asking, are you a sustainable brand or are you an ethical brand? So meaning, do you focus on doing right by people or do you focus on doing right by the planet? And I think this is kind of no longer, you know, you can't sort of think of it in that way anymore, because the relationship between people and planet is so deep that you know, you kind of need to consider everything, you know, if you're trying to really you know, do right by you know, people and planet. So I think so there's a number of things. So we try and build circularity into everything that we do from the design phase. You know, so for example, we try and design for maximum fabric usage so that there's no wastage, but also so that once clothes are taken apart, you have sizable chunks of fabric that you can do things with. So it's not like tiny little bits that you sort of you know, can't really do very much with. And that's sort of tying into quite nicely something that we're doing at the moment, where we're sort of working with a number of up and coming companies that are promoting repairing, alterations, restyling, extending the life of your clothes. Because actually, with the way that we design, let's say if it's a dress, you know, if you kind of are able to use the entire fabric of the skirt, that's quite easy to turn into either a skirt on its own, or you have enough to turn it into a tunic, into a top. So actually sort of the idea that, first of all, we cut and we design, well, we first design and then cut in a way that uses as much as possible of the actual piece of fabric, but also that once the clothing are made and owned for a certain amount of time, for whatever reason, if people want to transform them, change them into something else, you know, they're designed in a way that facilitates that. So that's sort of one way we do it. And then, I mean, it's very hard to be completely zero waste. So, you know, there's always a little bit of wastage. Obviously, we try and minimize it, but with that wastage, I guess we try and turn things that, you know, might be considered valueless into something of value. And that might mean turning them into accessories. You know, like I was talking earlier about little fabric, for example, earrings or necklaces, or sort of hair scrunchies, or in other cases, things like the reusable sanitary pads that we've been making for a while for the local community, for local schools. Obviously, period poverty is a problem everywhere around the world, but it is also a very large problem in many African countries or developing countries, Malawi being one of them. So, you know, we know that girls end up skipping a number of days of education because they don't have sanitary products. And so this was a great way of supporting the local community efforts to get girls to attend school, and, you know, sort of using some of our offcuts in a, you know, in a good way. And then we've done a number of collections using dead stock or end of life textiles, which are always quite fun and quite sort of interesting, because they pose unique challenges, because, you know, every bit of fabric is a bit different, the height, the width, you know, it's a little bit like a you know, like an intelligence test, you know, what can you do with this? And then, obviously, as you know, for example, working with you, using organic certified textiles, and again, trying to do it in a way that, first of all, supports the regional economy. So the organic cotton, you know, we could source it from India or China, but actually we chose to work with a partner in Uganda, because I think it's really important to sort of keep the sort of ecosystem regional level supported. Yeah, so I think we try. I mean, the workshop is mostly solar powered because actually sewing machines don't really need very much energy to run, and we converted all of our machines to have having a sort of solar friendly motor, which means it doesn't use very much power.
Oh, amazing.
Yes,
and you use a lot of you tend to use natural fabrics most of the time, don't you?
Yeah, so yeah, we just have a no polyester.
Yeah, which that means that they'll last longer. So all your wonderful plans about, you know, redesigning fabric into something else, that will work. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find nothing more frustrating than when you pick up a mix, you know, poly cotton, and then maybe the polyester has broken up into little bits and you can't then use that whole piece of fabric again. Whereas if you've got 100% cotton, 100% wool, 100% silk or whatever, they last much better as a piece of fabric.
Yeah, and they have that sort of nice characteristic that they sort of adapt to the wearer, so they get softer as you wear them, they sort of take your shape and all of that. So
that's really wonderful. No, it sounds amazing what you're doing, really, absolutely amazing. I love it. And so to have that mix, like you say, of environmental and fair trade, or people and planet, sounds a bit more friendly, but to have that balance together, it's very hard to have them separately, but it just, to me, they align so beautifully. You know, this podcast is basically about stuff. I know it's a overused word, but that's why I picked it. How we can make sure that all the things that we buy and that we use in our life has better impacts on people and planet. So that's why I'm holding this podcast, why I'm having the conversation. So what do you think, Paola, that needs to happen to encourage people and businesses to make better choices about what they buy and use?
Oh gosh, Jo, that's the $1 million question. I mean, look, obviously we have a small amount of time to discuss a very big problem, so I'm going to sort of try and I mean, I won't do it justice. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, because this is a real kind of, you know, it's a massive problem of our time, and I do think the real issue is that we consume too much of everything, and I suppose it's sort of, you know, you could say, well, that's all well and good, and you're sitting there trying to sell products, which I totally accept as a criticism, but I also accept that, you know, we try and make sure that every time a product is made, there's a positive impact on the people that have made it, and as much as we can, there's a net positive impact on the environment. I'm not going to say that we're there, but that's definitely sort of the direction that we're going. I mean, I do think on two levels, really. One is us as consumers, and brands talking to consumers. I think we need a lot more honesty and transparency. You know, from the small brands to the big brands, we all know that fashion is inherently problematic. You know, there's whatever way you look at it, but it's also got massive potential, and it's got massive value from a cultural level, from sort of being able to express yourself, also kind of creating opportunities if done in the right way. So I think we need a lot more transparency and honesty in our communications with consumers. I do think there's a lot of challenges around greenwashing or half-truths there, you know, and sort of messages that are maybe a little bit designed to serve an agenda. So I think we definitely need a lot more transparency, and actually kind of the guts to say, you know, we'd like to be perfect, but we're not. And these are some of the things that we're doing okay. These are some of the things that we know we've got issues with. And I think it's not always easy, and you kind of need to be ready to take the criticism, but it's important. And then the other thing is that, you know, we need legislation that is effective and that has got teeth, because a lot of the disclosures are voluntary at the moment. The regulation is fragmented because fashion is intrinsically a global industry. You pass a lot of different jurisdictions, and so there's plenty of opportunities to hide or pass the blame or pass the responsibility. And I think we need a much more cohesive legal framework to make sure that, you know, companies are held accountable regardless of where, you know, things might be happening. So I think those two things I think are really important. The, feeling empowered as consumers and understanding our power, and on the flip side, it's sort of brands speaking, honestly about what they're doing. And then the other one is obviously the kind of the laws and the regulations around our industry.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think, and you summed it up beautifully there. A huge, big issue, but you summed it up beautifully. And I think as well, going back to your customers, individuals having the power and the knowledge, it's about that. It's basically about individuals having those deeper connections. So when brands like Mayamiko, and hopefully Where Does It Come From, and many others are sharing the benefits in terms of telling people that by doing this, you're actually contributing to livelihoods in Malawi, this is why it's good, not okay, this is why it's better, rather than this is why it's good, and we're making some kind of effort. Maybe that encourages individuals to understand that when they're buying clothes from somewhere that maybe isn't sharing that information, that they're empowered to make different decisions, I suppose. It's about knowledge, isn't it? It's about making a decision based on knowledge.
Yeah, I think there's probably a sweet spot there between knowledge and data and actually an emotional connection. Because if you think about, we all have that t-shirt that is like 100 years old and it's full of holes, or whatever that might be, your equivalent of a t-shirt. It might be a dress, it might be a shirt, it might be a pair of jeans that you've got emotional attachment with. They might fit, they might not fit, you might still wear them, you might not wear them, but you kind of can't sort of bring yourself to separate yourself from them because they've got that sort of connection. And I'm not sort of saying that we should all be hoarders, but there is that sort of really powerful value of wearing something that you love and that you make memories in. And there is that sort of, that means that you're going to keep something longer, you're going to treasure it more. It's going to be less of a commodity and more of something that you value. And I think sort of value is a really important word in, well, everywhere, but in sort of in fashion, because I think we, for whatever reason, we have come to a place where the stuff that we buy doesn't have a lot of value attached to it. It's sort of almost become a little bit of a commodity. You sort of wear it maybe once, maybe twice, maybe you don't even wear it, and then it's sort of on it goes, and it becomes someone else's problem. So I think there is kind of the real balance between having that information that makes you feel empowered and then also rebuilding that emotional connection.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, before I got into ethical fashion, or whatever you want to call it, at all, what I used to do when I was probably in my late teens and first half of my 20s, when I traveled, I would like to buy something from places, and then I would always associate, oh, that's when I was I'd love that then for years and years and years, because I bought it in India or in Norway or something, and that was my special things. It wasn't about the garment at all. I didn't really care what the garment looked like on me or anything. It was just, I felt happier and better and connected for wearing that, and then, like you say, you build your own stories. Then maybe you go to a friend's wedding in a dress, so you think, oh, that's the dress I wore to that wedding, or isn't that amazing, I love that dress. And then if you feel happy, you'll look better, and then you'll think, oh, this dress makes me look really good because I look really happy.
And also it sort of like removes things like this sort of stigma around repeating outfits. I mean, I think actually a lot of people are sort of really embracing this, which is really nice to see compared to like maybe only a couple of years ago. It's actually really lovely to wear the same things multiple times, and I think for a while, especially sort of as Instagram became really big and sort of a real destination for fashion influencers, there was a little bit this thing around, you always have to be seen in something new. Whereas actually, something really lovely about wearing things that you love, that have got a story, that I guess they say make you feel good because of just how they make you feel. So I think that's really nice as well.
I think it is. And mending things, I love the culture about mending things. So you say, oh, I've put this mend in here and I've sewn this and I've put this patch on this, and it adds your own individuality then, doesn't it?
So this is why it's so lovely to see so many kind of up and coming initiatives, whether it's apps or websites or services that sort of help in there, whether that's by teaching you to make small fixes or finding really talented tailors or seamstresses in your area that can really transform something, because you might really love the fabric, but for whatever reason it doesn't fit anymore, or you have a different vision. So it's really nice to see, and I actually think that's really complementary to what we do. It's I don't see it as, oh my God, if someone repairs something, they're never going to buy something new from me. I actually think that increases the love that they have for us as a brand. So they might not buy as much from us, but they might recommend us to someone else, or think of us when they need something special. I think it's really nice to think of all these different ecosystems. Similarly with renting or resale, I think it's sort of a really nice kind of, like I say, ecosystem of services that support each other, really.
Yes, definitely. And it's a compliment. I take it as a compliment if someone's wearing something, where does it come from? And sometimes the natural dyes, they can fade a bit, and I know probably when we first started up, people would say, oh, this shirt's faded, I can't wear that anymore. And now I see people wearing them, they're a little bit faded, and I think, isn't that great? They've embraced the fact that the color is slightly changing, and it's they obviously love it because they're not getting rid of it, they're keeping it. So it's quite a special thing, I think. And you're right. And about tailors, I mean, I think tailors, there's always been tailors since they've been closed, I guess. But I do feel that tailors are coming back to the forefront now as part of a sort of a clothing, I don't know, you call it, you said ecosystem, but that whole thing around when you have clothes, you alter them, you make them fit you better. If you put on weight or lose weight, you can change it, or you can change the design or something like that. In fact, we're just altering. My husband used to work in London a lot, and he wore shirts that had cufflinks. He used to like wearing cufflinks, and my son is about to go into sixth form, so he needs all these new shirts. So we're actually getting a tailor to change all of the shirts that my husband had that he doesn't use anymore to have button cuffs rather than cufflinks.
Great.
And there's a tailor doing that, and I'm just thinking, I feel really pleased about that they're going to have this new generation wearing the same shirts, No,
so that's really nice. And I think there's so many talented tailors and creatives out there. I think it's one of those jobs that, I mean, my granny was a tailor on my mum's side, and my granddad on my dad's side was he was a soup maker. So I think for us in the family, it's always been kind of there. But I think there's obviously been a time where, like I said, because fashion became so cheap, it's almost like their contribution was devalued as well, because there wasn't really such a need for it. But if you take someone like me who's shorter than most, and I sort of need everything sort of altered, they're like my lifesaver, basically.
And they make things fit. I mean, I bought I probably told you this story before, but when we were going to a very posh wedding, my husband and I, a few years ago, and I ordered a dress from Etsy that was a vintage 1950s silk dress, and it's just absolutely beautiful, but I couldn't do it up, because if you think of women in the 50s, they had those
tiny
really tight waists. So I took it to the tailor around the corner a few roads away, and he basically managed to find some from letting out the darts and things like that. He managed to get this sort of few centimeters that I needed so that I could walk and breathe and things, and you would never know that it was done so skillfully. I was absolutely amazed, like, how did you produce that fabric from that dress so that I can actually wear it? So it's an amazing skill. I really hope that I really see that they are going to be getting a much more of a lease of life now in the kind of more sustainable world that we're living in. Anyway, one more question, Paola, and then I'll let you get on with your very busy life. I'm sure you have. What are your next steps, both for Mayamiko and for you, Paola, in moving forward? What's the next things you have in your busy brain?
So I think there's a couple of things. One is we're trying to, I was saying, I guess we're sort of constantly trying to improve and do better. So there's a couple of areas that we're trying to tackle from a dyes perspective, and also from a sizing perspective. We're sort of trying to expand our size range, which has always been a little bit tricky for us, because using 100% cotton sometimes, it doesn't give you a lot of flexibility, but we've really been trying to work on that. So there's some practical things that we're working on. There's also the fact that we realize we have built a bit of a community, and it would be nice to be able to share that with others, maybe younger brands or artisans that haven't really, maybe been able to find a platform just yet. So we're thinking about bringing in more products from different artisans or different groups that are more aligned to our values. I think one of the things we learned is that people like it's sort of a destination shopping experience. So, where you might find your dress, but then you might also be able to find some jewelry or some accessories that complement that dress. It's sort of with similar values, and you sort of can feel that experience is one, rather than sort of then having to go off somewhere else and looking for something. And so I think we're looking at that as an option, and then there's sort of another project that we're sort of working on, which is kind of building on something that I know you do as well, but that we did a couple of years ago and really resonated with our customers, which was using uniquely encrypted QR codes that told the story of the product. I think we were quite open-minded about whether that made a difference or not. We knew it made a difference for us because it kept us accountable, but we were not really sure whether that made a real difference from a consumer perspective, whether actually accessing that information changed the way that they felt about us as a brand, or maybe changed consumer behavior. And from the sort of limited experiments that we did, it does seem to have a real impact in terms of making more mindful choices, taking a little bit longer to make a decision, connecting with the story. So we're sort of hoping to build a little bit more on that, and just sort of seeing how we can expand that concept, and again maybe make it available to others from the experience that we've had. So I think we're sort of, I guess there's an element of us looking inward and trying to get better, but also there's an element of sort of saying, with what we've built, can we look outward and what can we share with others, and sort of kind of grow the community and grow the impact, not necessarily through products that we make, but sort of through, community connections, network, whatever you want to call it, sort of opening that up to others. So sort of that's
really interesting. And I think I feel like I've been on a similar journey. I think because maybe we've been doing this for a while, you start to realize that other people are coming in, and it seems daft for them to have to reinvent the wheel and do things that we've done and learned, and they might as well not make the same mistakes perhaps that we made. But interesting what you say about the QR codes, because it's nice to have your sort of reassuring comment that people do value that, because I must admit, I find, the percentage of people that actually that scan the codes and look up the story is quite a small percentage of people who actually buy. And my understanding of that from talking to people is they feel confident just because it's there. They don't actually need to scan it. And so you kind of think, well, why do we do it then? But actually you're right, it's validating it from your own point of view and keeping you accountable. But also, you never know when someone might be out somewhere with a friend, they might have had something for a year, and then say, well, actually no, if you do this happens, and you never know when someone's going to look something up to you.
You don't. And actually as in you can't predict it, but actually it's quite interesting to then look at the data, because I guess this is the wonderful world that we live in, where we can get sort of data about everything. It's really interesting to see how long people spend on the page, what kind of parts of the page they focus on. And like only very recently, and we did this as a pilot with 2,000 pieces, so it wasn't like a massively large pilot, but only recently we had a blip on the system, and I got an email from someone saying, I can't scan my QR code, what's wrong with it? And I wasn't expecting that. Like I thought, no one is ever going to know that this happened, and we had this sort of technical issue for a couple of days, and it was interesting to see that actually someone did notice, and what are the chances, and then there's other sort of I guess triggers that show that people are engaging with the content, and other sort of the number of people who have recommended us to others, because as you say, this is something that gives them confidence, that there's that openness about our practices and things like that. So Yeah.
No, brilliant. That's fascinating. Yeah, no, I think it's that constant improving again when you're a social entrepreneur or you know, fair trade, whatever you want to call us. I don't know what we are really, but impact entrepreneurs probably the better phrase. But you're always trying to think of what the next thing is and what the next you know, the next positive thing that you can be doing. And I think you're right, teaching others who want to come along the same or similar journeys is always a good one. They'll bring something new in and we can add that to a knowledge base that we already have, and then that makes very positive outputs for the future, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then you learn from them because they've sort of
Right.
come at different things with different kind of perspectives and different experiences, and you find actually I always thought that this mattered, but maybe it doesn't matter so much because you know someone is doing completely differently and it's going really well. So yeah, so kind of that exchange is really nice to have.
It's really I love hearing the new thoughts, the new ideas, and you think, God, I'd never thought of that, or that's an amazing sort of way of looking at it, because you can get a bit entrenched, can't you, in a way that you've done things, and then somebody else has a different way of doing things. So yeah, collaboration, you can't beat collaboration as a way of making a positive change.
No, which is interesting because it's not really something in fashion's DNA. I think it's becoming better now, but you know, if you think about it, it's always been about sort of secrecy, and you know, you didn't tell anyone who was producing your stuff just in case they went there. And you know, like yeah, I think it's sort of historically it's not really been a massively open industry. Certainly not everywhere, but I think now there's definitely a lot more collaboration and openness, certainly in certain types of brands and people, which is really nice.
It is. No, well, that's certainly what I've found. You know, the more you work with people, the more you can share ideas and learn from each other, and everybody benefits in the long run then, but especially the people who we're trying to do it all to help in the first place. So it's always got to be a good thing. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, Paola Masperi of Mayamiko, for joining me on the podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful discussion. As always, we could go on for hours and try and discuss everything, but we obviously better not, because you know there's other things that we ought to be doing really. But so thank you so much for spending the time. I'll put links to Mayamiko on the page with the podcast so people can check out what you're doing. I'll also put a link to our video of a few years ago when you and I were talking about the African fashion. So that's another quite good one. But yeah, thanks so much for spending the time. It's been absolutely wonderful talking with you today.
Thank you, Jo, for having us and for helping sharing our story.